I'm gonna tell you guys the story about my very first duty station in the United States Army. What's up, friends? Welcome to an all-new video. In this one, I'm telling you the story about my very first duty station in the United States Army. Now, before I dive into the story, make sure that you are subscribed to this channel. Also, enable that little bell so you get notified as soon as new videos go live, to include the live streams and become a part of the notification platoon. So, let me tell you about my very first duty station when I first came into the United States Army. So, set the mood. The year was way back in the year 2000. So I had, graduated basic training, AIT and everything, went home for hometown recruiting and everything, and it was probably around mid-January of 2000 that I went to my very first duty station of Fort Riley, Kansas. Now, prior to going there, I went on block leave and everything before reporting and everything. While on block leave, I got to visit with family, of course, but I also had like some of my personal items, transported. So I had the paperwork and everything to be able to go to a nearby military installation to kind of coordinate it. So coordinated with them for transportation to come pick up my items from my parents' home and have it shipped out to Fort Riley. So I did that while I was on vacation, and then when it came time for reporting, I would have to make the arrangements later to receive that goods. So you had a piece of paper, which is your orders, and it has like a report date of when you have to report by. You can report earlier than that, but you can't report later than that, unless you have some kind of, really good reason. So you had instructions about how to report, which are different than they are now. Back then, you had to report in your dress uniform. They kind of, choose usually to have you report in civilian clothes for the most part, usually nowadays, because they don't want you to potentially be a target if you're traveling in uniform or whatever. They might have you, like, sometimes some locations will, encourage you to not travel in uniform, but then when you get, somewhere's on base to maybe change in uniform, that may kind of vary, but for the most part, usually they don't want you reporting in uniform because they don't want you traveling in uniform and potentially become a target to someone who's looking to target someone in the military. But back then, this was prior to 9/11, so you didn't have the crazy, things that you had happening, nowadays, or even, the scares that, they were worried about. So they had us report in our dress uniform. At that time, it was the Class A uniform. So I remember I left my hometown, got on a flight. They pay for your flight to get you there and everything. And I, arrived at the airport. You're in dress uniform. I remember seeing other individuals that were also in their dress uniform. They were reporting as well. We were at the Manhattan airport in Kansas. And I remember they had a poster on the wall saying, new soldiers, call this number. And that was the staff duty desk for the Welcome Center, which is the in-processing place to kind of, get you in process into the system to get you to your first unit at your very first duty station. So one of the other guys that I was with that we ended up meeting up together, we ended up calling that phone number, and a staff duty desk ended up answering and brought a staff duty van to come pick us up from the Manhattan airport. There was maybe 3 or 4 of us, I think it was, and they came to the airport, picked us up, and took us on to Fort Riley. So from there, I remember, you're nervous. This is the very first time reporting to your first unit. You don't know if it's going to be like basic training. Is it going to be like AIT? Is it going to be more relaxed? The internet wasn't a thing back then. I mean, you had the internet, but you didn't have YouTube. So you didn't have, things to really educate yourself on what it was going to be like unless you knew someone who was already in the military or someone who'd been in the military recently. So for a lot of us, it was all very new. You didn't know what was going to happen. But we showed up at this place. You went to the front desk. You gave a bunch of paperwork and everything like that. They took us to barracks rooms. You had to usually share a room with another person, was what I had to do. So it was a small little room, not very big, maybe I would say the room was maybe 10 by 15 or something. It wasn't very big. It was only enough room for 2 beds, and I think there might have been a closet or something like that you had to share, and then the bathrooms were down the hall. There wasn't any bathrooms or anything in the room, so it wasn't a very big room at all. So we got all set in there. I think it was later in the evening, not quite at the evening, it wasn't dark yet. I remember it was still daylight out, so it was a little later, and it might have been even a Sunday or something, I don't remember. But we had a formation time for the next day, and we had to be in PT uniform and show up for that. And showed up for that, and I remember we did PT with a bunch of other individuals, and then after PT, then we had to be back in formation. You started doing all this in-processing stuff and getting your gear and all that kind of things. And some people were nervous. It was the very first duty station. I remember there was actually one individual that was, I don't know, just so scared, so nervous or whatever, that they were trying to figure out a way to get out of the Army. And they had like their roommate trying to tell them that this person was sleepwalking and pee in the bed and all sorts of other crazy stuff, I think, to try to get him out. I don't know if it actually worked. I wasn't like friends with the person or anything like that, but I just remember all that was going on. I don't know if it actually worked and he got out of the Army, or they just called his bluff on it and said, no, you're screwing with us, and just sent him to his unit anyways and let the unit deal with it. I don't know. I just remember that there was this one guy who was, I heard him in conversation talking to some of the other soldiers, being like, oh yeah, I got my roommate in on this, and where he's telling him that I'm peeing in the bed and I'm sleepwalking and stuff like that, so hopefully I can get the hell out of here and just get chaptered out of the Army or something. So we were at the reception area for like a week or something like that, and then you had a sponsor that towards the end came to see you, someone from your unit. I don't think I remember who the person was. I remember a lot of people from that unit, but I don't remember who the specific sponsor was that came to pick me up. But they came, picked you up, loaded my gear into like their car or their truck or something, and they took me to the unit, gave me a little bit in process, and then gave me a barracks room. And I remember I got stuck in a really crappy situation where I had to share a barracks room with these other two mortarmen in a different platoon. It wasn't even someone even in the same platoon as me. It was in the mortar platoon, and I had to share a room with them. And they already had a really nice setup going on. They were good friends, and so I just kind of got stuck with this crappy little kind of like corner area or whatever, this small little area that had to be like my little spot. And I remember I wasn't at that unit for very long. I think I was maybe at that unit for maybe a month, maybe even less than that, before we were off to the National Training Center. The unit was already getting ready to go. I think I remember even hearing talks about it when I was in reception, that the unit I was going to was already in NTC or getting ready to go to NTC. And I remember I showed up, they just did some processing. I think there was already some people at the National Training Center or something, I don't remember. But I remember I didn't meet everybody all at once. I met some of them at the National Training Center, and then some at Fort Riley. And then I had to, it was right away off to the National Training Center, without barely even being in the unit for very long. And that can happen where, your unit's in the field and you're just immediately sent out with them to join them. Deployments, usually not quite as much. Usually they give you a little bit of time to do medical and do some in-processing and everything like that, but it still can be a short turnaround of you joining the unit out on a deployment. But this one was just the National Training Center. There wasn't really deployments going on at this time very heavily just yet. And so I was off to the National Training Center pretty much right away. As far as like making friends, I made a few, friends with some of the newer soldiers. There were several of us that were brand new, so you guys kind of latched onto those individuals because you're inexperienced, they're inexperienced, they don't know what's going on, you don't know what's going on, and you kind of have that common ground, and you're a little intimidated by the people who'd already been there and already established themselves, and so you ended up kind of making friends with the other new people and everything, and kind of building this little clique of the new guys, and those are usually the people that you became friends with a lot of the time, and just kind of getting to hang out with them. During NTC, I started kind of making friends with some of the other people that had been there for a little bit, and some of them kind of brought us in and we're like, hey, new guys, we'll show you guys around, we'll show you where all the cool places are, and it worked out pretty good, for the most part. And I started hanging out with mostly the newer guys, but there was a couple of the people who'd been there for a little bit that kind of joined with us, and we would try to take us to some of the places to go to. I was under 21 at that time, so I couldn't go to the bars or whatever, but they probably saw this as a perfect opportunity that they now have some designated drivers to maybe drive for them while they're drinking out of the bars or something like that. So I remember going to some bars still, but I wasn't old enough to drink at the bars, so there's a lot of times I was just the designated driver driving someone else's vehicle for them while they got hammered at the bar and all that kind of stuff. And that's how you kind of got welcomed into the unit a lot of times, is we're gonna go to the bar, come on new guys, where we're going. Some of the other times, during the day, you'd kind of link up with some of the other individuals that had a car or something like that and be like, hey, we're gonna go check out the mall, or we're gonna go check out this or that or whatever like that. And you join up with them and, kind of hang out and, explore the area a little bit here and there. But it was definitely kind of, it was kind of scary. This was my first time being on my own. I was young. I'd gone from high school to the Army. I had a couple months in between of summer vacation, but this is my first time being on my own. I went from high school to all of a sudden being in the Army, and now on my own, and you have a lot of freedom, and it's not at all like it is in basic training AIT. So you actually have, freedom on the evenings when you're not, working, or on the weekends if you're not doing the kind of training or whatever. And so it was kind of, kind of crazy just having that much freedom that you weren't used to having. I had a lot of freedom, of course, in high school to roam around the town or whatever, but it's very different when you're on your own. You don't have parents, I guess, to have to report to, or keep in touch with and check in with or whatever. You're on your own and you're an adult, and so you're out and about and just kind of doing your own thing. And it was very kind of exciting and scary, I guess, a little bit at the same time. It wasn't long before I knew I wanted a vehicle. I had a vehicle when I was in high school. I had a little Ford Mercury Tracer, small little hatchback car, and I wanted something to be able to get around. I was tired of, catching rides with other soldiers that had, vehicles. So I want to say it was maybe only like 2-3 months into being in my very first unit that I decided I wanted a vehicle. And I just ended up going with another soldier that had recently purchased a car, and we went to just the same dealership. I don't remember what the interest rate was. It wasn't a very good car. It was like a 1998. No, it wasn't even that new. I think it was 1989 actually, or something like that. Ford Taurus, and the thing ended up being just a piece of crap. But it lasted for about a year. I think I had the thing for a year before I started to experience a lot of problems with that car. But that was my first car on my own, besides the car that I had when I was in high school. And I had a little bit more freedom now because I had my own vehicle to kind of get out and about. But it was definitely an experience. I learned a lot of things, learned a lot of, what you should do, what you shouldn't do at a duty station, all that kind of stuff. Made a lot of good friends, some people I still actually stay in contact with here and there. But I think the biggest advice I would probably give for other individuals, maybe when they're going to their new duty station, is get a chance to get out, experience the area, see what there is to do in the area, and try to make friends, if possible. Like I said, you probably just end up clinging to the other new soldiers as well, but it's good to make those friends, especially if you don't have a vehicle. You need someone to kind of pal around with, to get outside of the barracks with, and kind of experience the area. But for the most part, other younger soldiers will try to kind of bring you in and kind of help you out for the most part. There might be some that maybe aren't like that. I don't know. It's going to vary, of course, from unit to unit. But it was very intimidating. I remember, like I said, the soldiers had been there for a while, but don't let that, get in the way of introducing yourself to them or trying to get to know them. You might have a lot of things in common, and you guys might end up becoming great pals. Also, the biggest thing, I've received like some comments sometimes here and there, or messages or whatever, about people in basic training or AIT saying, the Army life is just not for them. It's not a good, kind of way to measure what your Army life is going to be like. Get out of your initial training, get to your first unit, spend about a year or two in the Army, and then you usually get a good feel for the Army as to whether or not the Army life is for you or not. Don't judge it on basic training, AIT, or OSIT or anything like that, because it is not like that at all. So for my viewers out there that are currently in the military, maybe some veterans out there, I'd love to hear about your experience at your very first duty station. Maybe a little story you want to share down in the comment section. I'd love to hear about it. And for those of you that maybe are going to join the Army here soon, I'd love to hear maybe where you're hoping to get. What duty station are you hoping to get for your first duty station? All right, thank you guys so much for watching. I'm ThatChrisChaos, and I'll see you next time. See ya.